dissent is rapidly becoming basically criminalized by the government and demonized by the media. Even media which is ostensibly informational, like news, even media which is supposed to be entertainment, like pop culture and sports, all pushing us to the same values, all negative towards contrary ideas to that. We live in an era where the state wants to be the total state and the great collective. And in an era like that, all media is indoctrinational. Regardless of what purpose the viewer thinks is served by the media, if it's connected to the establishment, if it's big, it's indoctrinational. Now, it's not surprising that government and media are moving in the same direction, since both are increasingly what? Owned by the same entities. Mankind doesn't really have a lot of experience with true self-government. We think of it as the norm because we've either had self-government or the illusion of self-government, increasingly the latter, all our lives. But it's not the norm for mankind. And we don't know if you can really sustain self-government in an environment where there's mass media. We haven't had mass media that long. And even smaller amount of time when the mass media is concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, all of which are connected to the state. Can humanity have true self-government in that situation? Maybe they can have the illusion of it, but it is a question that needs to be asked. In the past, let's say a tyrant tried to lecture their population on what values to have. They were often undermined by the culture. The bards sang their songs, the poets gave their poems, the actors and the traveling shows and the minstrels, the comedians, all types of artists. They came up with different narratives that countered what the tyrant was trying to push. Increasingly, government and the big media, though, they're working together to convince the population to be this and not that, to look here and not there, teaching them their 2 minutes of hate. Look, people get shown some instance of graphic evil, either in some remote part of this country or maybe even some foreign land. And they show these images and they tell one side of the story until the viewer thinks that they know something about that situation, when all they really know is what little the establishment media has told them, and they demand the government intervenes over there. And that's what the government wanted all along. The government wanted permission to intervene, and I think increasingly the media is even manufacturing the consent. In other words, they will give the impression that people are demanding the government take action when really most people are not demanding that. Most people have learned, the last 20 years we've tried to intervene in foreign lands. It really hasn't worked out very well. Why is it going to be different this time? Do we really have the right to remake some foreign land in our own image? And it's not even our image. It's the image that the dandies in D.C. want, which really is the heartland of America doesn't agree with it any more than the foreign population. So are these questions ever asked on this media? No. They said, what is the cost? Who's going to pay No, those questions don't get asked. The intervention is just justified and done. And increasingly, dissent from the so-called conventional wisdom is not viewed as a right. It's viewed as a disease, which makes us weaker. Dissent is the problem. Dissent, they have a collectivist view of dissent, where if someone who stands up and speaks something that disagrees with the leaders, they're the problem for saying it, even if what they're saying is true. The leader wants to take the population from the truth. And These people that mention that, they're not the problem. They're reporting on the real problem. But let me just ask you, if the collectivist view of dissent is true, how did the United States ever become the greatest nation on earth? And why is it that the harder we're pressed into collectivist conformity, the more we become mired in mediocrity? If the collectivist view of dissent is true, why is all that true? During the time, there was a time when America was growing. It was growing economically, not based on debt like we've seen since the 70s, but it was growing based on production, based on invention, growing artistically, growing technologically. One of our defining features was our diversity, not of skin color or sex or lifestyle, anything superficial like that, but of thought. Western European nations had some state-approved church. In America, we didn't. So in Western Europe, they were killing each other over religious differences that over here, people just work side by side together anyway. They had to reason their differences out. They compromised. There was no demand for uniformity, or there was, but it was limited. It was overwhelmed by the respect for dissent. Okay, how about this? The rugged individualist. It's an American archetype, isn't it? The term Yankee ingenuity, what does that mean? It connotes a way of solving problems that the community has never thought of before, and certainly didn't approve of it. When you look at the evidence of history, rather than basing emotions on limited experience from a series of heart-wrenching images from a really controlled media, dissent is not what is holding America back. Our past respect for dissent is what allowed America to move forward. Our accelerating march towards uniformity of thought and words, that's not making us better, it's making us worse. Dissent isn't the disease, friends. Collectivism is the disease. The kind of progressivism that has a collectivist view of dissent, it only is going to make progress towards a dystopian, totalitarian nightmare. Now, there's a reason for this. Collectivism suffers from an inability to absorb feedback from reality, right down to the individual who goes along with it. The individual members, they go to herd animal thinking. Humans are social animals, but we're not herd animals. Herd animals don't use their minds to gather information about reality very much. Rather, they dedicate their intelligence to doing what? To detecting which way the leaders of the herd wants them to go, and they just follow along. Most of the herd, they just quit thinking for themselves. They quit responding to other stimuli from reality because acting on them is punished by the herd. What's rewarded? Unthinking conformity is rewarded. Now, nations where the ruling class forces conformity the most, such as Islamic nations or North Korea, they're backward nations. They're miserable places to live. The people suffer greatly for their inability to conform to reality because a collectivist view that views dissent as a disease rather than being essential to progress can't compete with societies where people are free to think for themselves, act for themselves, speak for themselves when they discover reality is telling us something different than what the head man wants us to believe. My fear is that such societies are becoming increasingly rare as the global elites sense that they've got a chance to do it. They've got a chance for the first time in history within their grasp. They have a chance to impose a global collective. There are no other nations that will leap past them because that nation is free, whereas their people are mired in this collective that just glorifies the ruling class and doesn't permit freedom. Everybody has to do it the way the people at the top want. They can control, because of the media, they can control with what is perceived as reality for almost everybody. But what they can't do is control actual reality, and frighteningly, I'm not sure they can tell the difference anymore. By demonizing dissent, by imposing a collectivist viewpoint, they eliminate a vital feedback mechanism by which a population's perception of reality is corrected by input from actual reality. Following the herd requires a lot less thinking than acting as an individual. It provides the illusion of an escape from, first of all, independent thought is hard work. You burn a lot of calories just thinking. And sometimes there's a heavy burden when you have to take individual responsibility instead of the I was only following orders escapism of the herd thinker. Humans are social animals, but we should not be herd animals. There's a difference. The herd thinking is an alluring trap, especially for lazy people, but it's still a trap. We are meant to be social animals, not herd animals. We can only become herd animals rather than social animals by abandoning our moral free agency, by renouncing a part of what really makes us human, of what we really are, by choosing, maybe even subconsciously, to become a herd animal. We renounce a key part of what makes us human. So, I exhort you, I appeal to you, cling to your humanity, cherish your humanity, and offer it up to no collective on earth. I don't care if it's a national government, a corporation, a political party, a religious institution, or whatever. The collective says dissent is the disease, but dissent is what permits a culture to stay connected to reality. And the consequences for ignoring reality for both individuals, groups, and nations is painful and often fatal. Collectivism is the true disease, and the freedom to dissent is the cure. Thank you for listening.